Welcome to episode 12 of Property Avenue WA. This is your avenue to matters property in Western Australia. And for those that have only just joined us and not seen previous episodes, we try to talk about a different topic each week that involves property. We've spoken to real estate agents and we've spoken to various professionals, and not necessarily that are directly involved in selling or buying property. We've spoken to a lawyer with regard to wills, for example, which are important associated with property. But what we do encourage, if there's a particular topic that you would like to hear about or would like us to get an expert in to talk about, then drop us a note. If you go on our live stream or on our Facebook page, you can send us a message and let us know what you would like to talk about. We've got a couple of interesting topics coming up shortly. Tonight we're going to talk about surveyors and surveying as a profession, and it's probably one of those professions that is a bit forgotten. It's probably not realised how important it is in relation to the world of property. And that block of land that you've got your nice house sitting on, or that block of land which seems to be the flavour of the month at the present time, of course, with the incentives, that block of land that's been created, that's all been done by the surveyor before it even got to the point of you going to the builder or going to your settlement agent or going to the real estate agent or whatever the case may be. So a surveyor is a very, very important part, not just with big industry, but also for us little people that live in our little homes and sit in the comfort. So tonight we've got Brad Collard from Hilly Thompson Delphos, which is a very old firm from Geraldton here in WA. And Brad is a local boy. He grew up here in Geraldton. And the family are well known, particularly with a very well established footy club there in Geraldton here called Railways Football Club, the Blues. And so Brad's very much associated with that. He went to school here in Geraldton and then went to university and did his Bachelor's Surveying degree, came back to Geraldton and joined Hilly Thompson Delphos, or HTD as we like to call them, in 1999. And then I have to speak to Brad about this, licensed surveyor in 2007. So we'll just check with him how long. Then became a partner with Hilly Thompson and continues to be a partner, of course, in 2012. He does cadastral surveying and planning facets of the business. I'll have to ask him about cadastral surveying as well. And I do know he likes a game of golf, and his dear dad, I used to play a fair bit of golf with. He reckons he's not a great golfer. He's won the trophy for the Blues boys when they have their special day, but probably the wrong trophy. But he blames the kids for that because there's not enough time to practice. But anyway, we'll get on to some more serious things. Brad, welcome, mate, and thanks very much for coming on board.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Thanks for the invitation. Good to be here.
Pleasure. Mate, as I said before in our intro, it's one of those industries, professions that is very much, and hence why I was really keen to get you on board, because it's a profession that perhaps is not really recognised. I know we get people that come to see us and then we say, oh, you need to see a surveyor, and they go, oh, what? Why do I need to see them? So can you give us a little bit of an insight as far as what the surveyor is about in your simple terms?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, a lot of people probably, if they do deal with a surveyor, it might be sort of once or twice in their lifetime. And yeah, sometimes you wouldn't necessarily need to deal with a surveyor. But basically what we do is we measure things and sort of locate where things are in the world. So we do that my sphere is all about what's called cadastral surveying, which is all to do with the definition of land boundaries. So we, from the initial stage where when it's an open paddock, we mark out the lots and draw the plans to create the lots, and then probably then later on down the track where most people might come across a surveyor is if you buy a property or looking to buy a property or you're looking to replace a fence, you'll need those boundaries redefined. So then a surveyor is the person that does that. And yeah, basically is responsible for defining property. That's sort of the main aspects of a cadastral surveyor. But yeah, we obviously do all sorts of surveying here.
Yep.
Yeah, that's basically where we come into it.
Brad, it's interesting when you talk about fencing, and there's a number of topics that we'll discuss tonight with regard to surveying and the obviously the importance of a surveyor, people buying property. But in recent times, we've had in the Midwest region, we've had a big storm that came through here and damaged a lot of fencing, and now a matter of trying to get a fencing contractor to repair those fences is the next question. But certainly as a settlement agent, as a conveyancer, we've come across scenarios where the boundary is not quite right. Yes, the boundary fence is there, but it's not on the right boundary. It's not on the boundary, the legal boundary of the property that you've got your home on. And sometimes we've had properties as much as 20, 30 centimetres, half a metre inside or outside the boundary. That's still an important part of the process with regard to boundary fences. If the pegs have been removed or suddenly everybody doesn't realise where they're at, where's the surveyor play that part?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, usually what happens is sometimes happen is that the corner pegs get pulled out to put the fence in, and that's fine. That's probably not too bad, but yeah, so in older areas you get it all the time where there's an original fence and everyone has measured off that, but the original fence wasn't necessarily in the right spot, and that sort of translates all the way down the street. So then, yeah, everyone thinks they've got their little bit of land, but that doesn't really agree with the fences. So that happens probably more regularly than you'd think. And I mean, sometimes it's not a big issue. I mean, but yeah, you sort of usually comes about when people might want to develop or extend their building, and what they think they've got room to do, they don't have room because the fence isn't on the boundary. So I mean, basically the only way to define that is to get a cadastral survey done, basically a re-establishment survey where we go back to the original marks and lay it in from the original survey, and that is the legal boundary. So that's sort of where we come into it. But yeah, as you said, it does happen a fair bit. And I mean, nowadays with aerial photography, there's facilities to look at your place and see the boundaries and on an aerial photo, and that'll tell you if something's sort of grossly wrong. But yeah, even sometimes that doesn't even happen. So yeah, it usually happens when a fence needs to be replaced or someone's looking to develop their property, because usually everyone's happy while the fence is up and no one's doing anything. But as soon as you go to do something, then it sometimes does get discovered and becomes an issue. Yeah. Yep.
Do you get many inquiries with regard to that type of work? Like in the current market where, as I say, we've had a number of fences in the Midwest region, you have storms, etc., occurring and fences blowing over. Do you get much inquiry? Do people are aware of the fact that, hang on, maybe I should check a surveyor and may ensure that, or is that done by the builder or the fencing contractor?
I mean, the fencing contractors and the builders will probably recommend that a survey is done. And I mean, a lot of people, for whatever reason or however, they understand that the fence mightn't be on the boundary, but they don't really necessarily worry about replacing it or realigning it while it's still a good fence. But if something does happen, then they probably take that opportunity to then define the boundary properly and realign it onto the proper boundary. So that sometimes comes about. But and it really depends. I mean, there's a big difference if you're going to build a brick wall or a retaining wall, then that's obviously a bigger investment, and then you'd sort of you'd definitely be recommending a formal re-establishment if you're doing that sort of thing. Whereas a fence may not be as big a deal. Yeah, we do deal with that quite often. Yeah.
With people at the current time, like this stimulus package that's around at the present time, and there's obviously a lot of enthusiasm. Why wouldn't there be when there's $45,000, $55,000 worth of incentive to build up if you're a first home buyer? And if you're not a first home buyer, you're still entitled to quite a substantial incentive. Is it something that you would recommend with regard to clients who bought a block of land and suddenly going to build, or is that something again that the builder would sort of liaise with the client as far as it? Because I certainly know that in our profession as a settlement agent, we have come across scenarios that have been near on nightmares, and you think, how did that happen? Whereby suddenly, like you just mentioned, you've got a brick wall or a large retaining wall being built, and suddenly there's these huge issues that have evolved, all due to the boundary fence and the fact that boundary has exceeded the real area of the land that the people own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, really, what you would recommend is, as part of your due diligence in purchasing, that you would get a re-establishment done. That might not be the difference between buying something or not buying something, but at least you're going in with your eyes open, and you're aware of the issue, and then you can make the decision whether that is too much of an issue or if it can be resolved quite simply. But yeah, with I mean, most new builds, what will happen is the builder would require, or the architect would require a site and feature survey done, and they use that to design where the building sits and floor levels and outlooks and privacy type considerations. And I mean that is a requirement for your building application to go to the local government. So we get involved in that stage, and then if there is retaining, or if there's, basically any time the building then should be set out in the correct location. So we get involved at that stage. So basically we are usually involved at sort of prior to building, and then sometimes as part of the building process to actually set where the house goes to make sure it is in the right spot. Can save, for a massive investment like that, it's can save a lot of heartache for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly, and I'm looking forward to, as I said in our introduction, that we're hoping to get a couple of people that are associated with insurance, not just in property insurance, but also title insurance. In fact, I did a webinar today where they made reference to the importance of title insurance, and those sort of things would come into play. But we've certainly experienced it where people have bought a property, and it can be an expensive exercise because all of a sudden you're quite innocent with what's occurred, and you might have inherited the problem, but suddenly the next door neighbour sort of says, well, you've got half a metre of my land, you've protruded over, and it might all be, like you were saying before, extensions that are done. And suddenly, I think there was one scenario we had where a corner of the swimming pool area was basically protruding into the neighbour's property. So that had to be resurveyed. And of course, everyone said, what do we do? I said, well, first things first, you need to see a surveyor. But of course, that entailed negotiation between the neighbours, because I turn around to you and say, well, Brad, yeah, no problems. We can realign the boundaries, and but it's your cost. And you're also going to pay me X amount of dollars because I'm losing value in my property. So it can be, if you don't get this right, it can be an expensive exercise, and that's where the importance of a surveyor comes into play. And as I say, I think it's a bit of a forgotten profession. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, as I said, probably as part of your due diligence, ideally you'd identify that up front, and then it might not be a deal breaker if something like that is revealed, but at least you're going in with your eyes open, and you might be able to talk to the neighbour and see how agreeable they are, and know exactly what you're in for. And I mean, there is ways to deal with those things, and I mean, probably the way that you mentioned in getting an agreement with both parties, and then the encroacher, say, paying for the subdivision and then some land value is probably really the simplest and most painless one way to deal with it. I mean, it's still as you said, it can still be an expensive and time-consuming exercise. But I mean, then, I mean, if that doesn't work, then you can go down the legal path. But yeah, that's not really making for good neighbours. So
more money,
yeah.
more money. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Yep. And yeah, as I said, not really making for good neighbours. So yeah, I think it's pretty important if you can try.
Yeah, very much so. Mate, the other thing with regard to, for those who have just joined us, I've got Brad Collard from Hilly Thompson and Delphos. They're surveyors and planners here in Geraldton in West Australia. And the idea was to, it's a profession that probably is not, well, let's say doesn't have the bells and whistles that some professions have with regard to not necessarily the flavour of the month, I suppose, is one of those, is a way of putting it. But we're talking with Brad and discussing the various things associated with surveying, but not surveying associated with the residential property. For those that have got a block of land, those that are buying a house, those where your fence is blown down and you're not quite sure that, okay, the fence was there, but is that the right line, the right correct boundary of your property? Not the fence boundary, but the actual legal boundary of the property that you own. So that's what Brad does, and that's what a surveyor is all about. And also, with regard to Hilly Thompson, you're also involved in planning. What's that involved, Brad?
Yeah, well, basically we deal with subdivisions. So I mean, it can be if someone is looking to purchase a place, they might come to us and say, what's the subdivision potential of this block? And then we look at it, and I mean, it's a lot more than just, say, the zoning, which will tell you, what lot size you can create there. There's a lot of other things that go into determining if it is possible and feasible. So we'll look at sort of the servicing and those sort of things. And then, we basically deal with the subdivision process, which is it goes through the WA Planning Commission. So we deal with the planning side of it, and then obviously there'll be survey involved in most cases, so we can deal with that and deal with all the planning to get the clearances required and finalise it. There's with the subdivision, there's a few different ways that can be done, and so that we look at sort of the most sort of economical and feasible way to deal with it. So they all have different requirements, so we can investigate that and come out with the best outcome. So that's the planning side of things. In terms of that's the main thing we deal is the subdivision side of planning.
Yep. But the other thing too, Brad, with regard to you talk about subdivision, a lot of people sort of imagine subdividing is this huge development of 100 blocks and dividing that up. And sure, that's the sort of work you do, although that's perhaps particularly in this region, that's sort of dried up a little bit to what it was in its heyday. But there's also, we certainly get plenty of inquiry, and that's when I say plenty of inquiry, we certainly get inquiry from clients to say, well, we want to cut our block, we've got a large block, we're going to put a unit at the back and do the front up and then move into the back, or whatever the case would be. That's where a surveyor comes into play. So it's not just those that want to divide a block up into 100. You've got a large area of land, you want to put 100 blocks on it. It's also the everyday mum and dad who's got not that there's too many blocks that are that big these days, but we were talking to a builder last week, and they're building houses on 350 square metre blocks. But perhaps in regional areas like Geraldton and other parts of WA, regional areas where there are bigger blocks, and some of the older homes in the city, for example, where people are subdividing, that's where your role will come into play with regard to, I suppose, talking to you about the options that I can do with my block. You'd have an understanding of what the council and the planning commission's rules are, whether they can divide that into a strata title or a standard green title. Those are sort of things that you would be associated with, would it not?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as you said, locally there hasn't been a lot of large-scale subdivision happen for a few years now. So, and I mean, even prior to that, a lot of our work is the normal average mum and dad with a larger block or a block, and then they're looking to develop that to its full potential. So yeah, basically we'll look at what their options are and what would be involved to do it, so that they go into it with their eyes open, knowing fully what's going to be involved. I mean, probably some people, obviously don't have the understanding and think it's just a matter of putting in a few pegs and that's the new boundary. But it is a process of getting approvals and then supplying conditions. So we will let research what is likely to be involved, let the prospective clients know what is likely to be involved, and then they can make the decision where it is, if it is worth doing. In a lot of cases it's not, because to get it to a point where you can do the subdivision involves too much work in bringing services up and those sort of things. So basically put all the information from them so they can make a decision whether doing the subdivision is going to benefit them, I suppose, is where we...
And Brad, the other thing with regard to the surveying side and for subdivision side of things, timeframes. A lot of people, and again, I'm going to be so careful when I say a lot of people, but majority of people that I've deal with over the journey, and certainly perhaps not as bad as it's been, but there is pretty much and you and I have certainly been involved in a number of dealings for clients. Some have been very, very complicated and taken a very, very long time. But I'm wanting to subdivide my block of land, and before I even start building or do anything of that nature, what people ask me, what sort of time frames, what sort of, without putting a gun at your head, but what sort of, on average, would you consider a time frame that the process would be before it becomes, as we call it, or as is known as, in order for dealing? So in other words, for those that aren't aware, when we say it's in order for dealing, it means that plan that's been created, a bit like your building plan, the plan for your block of land that Brad's put together and got all approvals and whatever, in order for dealing means that you can now come to Champion Bay Settlements, that we'll use as the example, to then apply for those titles as per that plan. But there's a long process before we get to that point, is there not? What, on average, what would you say would be because we get that question a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I'd probably say if you got a subdivision done from where to go in 12 months, you're doing pretty well. Because
when you say where to go, are you talking about before it gets to us, the settlement agent, or are you talking about?
Yeah.
So is that when you finish your bit?
Yep. So basically, if someone comes in and says they want to subdivide my block, so I suppose the process is we'd put an application into the Planning Commission. They have 90 days or 3 months to come back with a decision, and then that approval will have conditions on it, and it's a matter of dealing with each of those conditions, and they're mainly around provision of water, sewer, power service, those sort of things. So it's a matter of dealing with each of those agencies and doing the works and paying the fees to satisfy their conditions. I think if you, from the point of making the application to getting to an order for dealing stage where you can go to yourself to apply for titles, if you do that in 12 months, you're probably doing pretty well.
Yep.
Some are obviously a lot longer, and some, if the existing servicing is already in place and can be shorter, but that's probably a fairly general sort of a time frame.
Brad, and with regard to the process here in Western Australia, if and I'll ask the question, are you getting much inquiry from eastern states for people that perhaps, is that entertaining the idea of, most people we've spoken with recent weeks with our episodes, and I know we've experienced it where people from the eastern states are contacting us, and obviously the processes are different here in Western Australia to what it is in other parts of Australia. Are you getting much inquiry from that? And is there much of a difference in the processes here to the East Coast, for example?
Not specifically as a result of I think you're probably talking about the home builder grants and the federal grants. Haven't really had a lot from eastern states specific to that, but we do fairly regularly get inquiries from people that have invested in property locally, and then their next step is to try and maximise what they can do with it, whether that's through subdivision or basically finding out what they can develop on the actual property. But in terms of the new government grants, we haven't noticed that stimulating much interest from interstate, but it has definitely from local people. Where we've seen that is mainly from people that have got an existing property with a dwelling at the front, but they're looking at building an additional dwelling at the rear. And I think as part of these new grants, one of the provisos is that the additional dwelling is on its own title.
Yes.
So that's where we would come in to facilitate that.
Yep.
We have noticed a fair bit of inquiry around that at the moment, and when the details on that are still pretty scant. But from what we've been able to see, that it looks like if building contracts are in place prior to their deadline, then that should allow them to qualify for the grant and then actually apply for it sort of once the actual subdivision is finished. So it does look like that is a feasible thing. Earlier when I was talking about an indicative time frame, I mean that was say more for a like a conventional freehold subdivision. But these instances here where we're talking about building additional dwellings, I mean you'd probably suggest you'd go through a strata process there, where that time frame is more in line with the actual building time frame. So pretty much as soon as the building's completed and everything's finished, we can get the subdivision finalised and get ready for title. So that's different method of subdivision, which in these instances is probably the way to deal with it.
Yep. The I'll ask the question for those that aren't who've joined us or are wondering who we're talking about. I'm with Brad Collard from Hilly Thompson Delphos, who is a long-standing surveying and planning business here in Geraldton in Western Australia, and we're perhaps just unlocking a few myths, if you like, that with regard to the surveyors, but more importantly, identifying the importance of a surveyor for the everyday residential property, be it your block of land, or you want to subdivide your block and build something on the back, or you've got some land out the back and suddenly decided that you can cut that up into 3 or 4 lots and sell it off. That's the sort of thing that Brad does and the sort of thing that a surveyor does, and that's the importance of a surveyor in the whole process. But mate, you've got to have in all these experiences you've had, there's got to be a horror story somewhere, because I've got one, but you tell me you must have one in relation to the surveying side of things that you just go, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, we still do get it. And I mean nowadays, I mean, anyone with access to a computer can basically look at a property and work out where things sit, if there's something grossly wrong. But I mean, we do still see it where people have gone and bought something and then gone to do something and found out, hang on, what we thought was my bathroom is actually inside next door's property. So it still happens. It's I mean, nowadays, I said, with the access to the aerial photography and the digital cadastre, it probably shouldn't, but it still does. And it can also be, people have had a property for a long time and always thought that what they thought was the fence was the boundary, but it usually happens when they or the next door neighbour goes to do something or replace a fence or to add an extension, then it's revealed, and it still happens far too often.
We had a classic story a few years ago now, but not necessarily in Geraldton as such direct, but one of our little smaller communities, but where the mining company had bought all this land and of course established homes there for the staff while the mine was operating, etc. And that was fine until they then sold those off, and then it was revealed. We suddenly identified the fact, and I can't tell you exactly how it was identified, but it might have been the bank got a valuation done, or someone picked it up that suddenly thought, well, hang on, this house, that boundary fence doesn't look, that's not quite right. And what had actually occurred is this house, one particular home, was sort of partly on your block. So half the house was on your block and the other half was on my block, which not only was half of my house on your block, so was half of my garden, veggie garden. And of course, what had occurred then was the fact that it just then revealed, well, if it's there, what's happening down the road? So suddenly it was revealed that these houses all down one side of the street were all half and half. So we suddenly had to do a lot of work over a long period of time, and it wasn't, we're probably talking a good 15 to 20 years ago now that this has occurred, but it created an absolute nightmare. And of course, the difficulty was trying to convince people that somewhere on the line, this had to be sorted because it was going to be an ongoing problem. And of course, you get that person in between. Everyone says, well, let's just get it fixed. And then someone says, well, hang on, there might be some dollars here for me, so I might get something out of this. But I think the majority won in the end. But it was a classic example of the nightmares that you can have and the importance of a surveyor, particularly in perhaps older suburbs where things have changed. And as you say, boundaries and that change. Suddenly you've got half your bathroom in your next door neighbour's block. Looks fine. The boundary fence is over there. Looks fine. I'm inside my boundary. But not necessarily is that the case when it comes to the legal ownership of the land. So, there's some, there have been some classics, and I'm sure that between the two of us, we could share a few. Mate, just quickly, the other thing is we try to keep these down to around about 30 minutes, and we've already done our damage there, but that's okay. Farming properties. We have a situation there where we've had where they decide we're going to amalgamate blocks, and instead of, we talk about subdividing blocks into 2 or 3 new blocks. But there's also the other way around, and farmers are the first ones that I think of, where they amalgamate and create 2 paddocks, for example, into one, or one lot, if you like. That's also an area, isn't it, that surveyors attend to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And yeah, that's, yeah, as I said, happens in farming situations, and also in commercial situations. It quite often happens where
yep.
building and they want to expand onto the next lot, and to keep it all in the one building, they need to amalgamate the 2 lots together to allow the building to be, not to straddle lots, which isn't good. And I mean that's still basically still classed as a subdivision, so it still goes through the subdivision process. But I mean, in a lot of cases, it's generally a lot easier to go from 2 lots to 1 lot than it is go from 1 to 2 in terms of, usually the servicing is already existing, and it doesn't, in a lot of cases, even require survey because it's already been surveyed as 2 lots. So it's a matter of using that existing information. So it is a lot easier to go from, as I said, from 2 to 1. But it still goes through the subdivision process. So there's still those sort of timeframes associated. Yeah, but it is a quite common thing.
One of the other things that we talk about boundaries, but we also talk about you made mention earlier on, in fact, I think it was before we went on air, that do you attend to the detail or site survey of your block to allow design approval of new building? What's that mean? Is that something we've already covered as such? What's that mean when talking about new buildings? A lot of people out there doing new buildings at the moment. What's that entail?
Basically, one of the requirements of the local government will be to submit a site survey as part of your building application, and it also gets used by, say, your builder or your designer to actually sit where the building's going to go and what height, the floor level, and that sort of thing. So basically, a site and feature surveys, if it's a vacant block, we basically run over the block and measure the existing ground levels, locate any fencing, adjoining houses, the road levels, any servicing infrastructure, so that can all be shown on a plan, which, as I said, allows people to design, the best place to put things, make that things don't clash, and have, say, windows looking into windows and those sort of things in terms of your building design and planning. So yeah, we deal with that at the planning stage of the building process.
We could go on, because one of the areas that I also like to talk about is strata titling, but I think we might do that another day with regard to that. And there's a few other things that we could go on, but obviously, I suppose what we've emphasised is the importance of a surveyor, the importance in the processes, and it's perhaps if someone is entertaining the idea of dividing a block of land or whatever the case may be, or you're looking at building, then it's something that you would discuss with your builder, or perhaps you would speak to a surveyor with regard to that. Would that be a logical sort of suggestion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we get a lot of it where, the first thing they might do is go to the builder and say they want to, build this 3x2 down the back. But then usually what will happen is the builder will say, well, you probably need to get a surveyor involved. And the first thing will be to maybe do a site and feature survey to make sure that what they want to do is going to actually fit. And then, then if they do want to do this, take it to the subdivision stage, and we can advise them of what would be involved to do that. And whether that's through a freehold subdivision or a strata subdivision or whatever, we can present those options and help them sort of work out what the best way to go is.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep. Mate, we've as I said, we try to keep it. I've got a bit of we've sort of started doing a bit of an if question, and the question I've got for you: if you could be a professional athlete in any sport, and I know you enjoy your sport, what sport would you choose?
As I think you said at the start, I was a footballer, and would have loved to have been a decent footballer, but now in the older age, probably that's all sounds a bit hard. So maybe something a bit more like a dart player or a lawn bowler.
A dart bowler, okay, righto, okay. And if you could learn anyone's skill in the world without trying, what would it be?
Well, yes, I think you mentioned my golfing ability, and
without trying,
it's obvious. Try it, because I try pretty hard and I'm no bloody good at it. So.
Brad, look, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate, and hopefully we've given some people out there, and those that may be listening live and those that listen later on, we welcome you to send your questions through. Mate, I really appreciate you coming on board and being involved with Property Avenue WA. And as I say, we'll definitely get you back on at some point. We're trying to vary it as much as we can with our various topics associated with property. But appreciate everything you've done, and hopefully there's been an insight for those people that have been watching and listening. So thanks very much, mate. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me. It was good. Thank you.
Pleasure, mate. Just before we go, just like to thank you. If there is a topic, as I said before, about property that you'd like us to discuss, then send us a message, send it on our Champion Bay Settlements Facebook page. We've now, you'll be pleased to know, maybe you're not pleased, but we've creating a YouTube channel, Property Avenue WA. We're still building on that. I mean, you can get the videos via there, but we're just still doing a bit of work to dress it up a little bit and make it a little bit more inviting. But if you do have a topic, please do. We hopefully next week, I think, get to discuss insurance. Not just insurance, but also perhaps you look after your property and the various things that can help you look after your major asset is probably what we're talking about. But again, thanks, Brad, very much. Been a pleasure. Always welcome to people are always welcome to contact us. And one other thing I meant to mention is too that we've now found a way that we can do. You don't have to watch us live in a TV format. You can also, we're now expanding towards a podcast. So watch this space and we'll let you know, we'll give you more information. Thanks a million for joining us. Please take care and stay safe. And all those people, if you're in Victoria, we don't envy you. We're enjoying it here in WA. Take care.